to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd.
Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack.
I don't care if we
The popularity of baseball in America was unmatched by any other sport. Vassar College had a women's baseball team beginning in 1866. League play with regional champions came about in the 1890s. In 1898, Lizzie Arlington played on a men's minor league team, pitching for the Reading, Pennsylvania Coal Heavers. By the early 1900s, many female players had switched to softball, both slow pitch and fast pitch. But Bloomer girls continued to play baseball from the 1890s to 1934, taking on men's town teams in exhibition games. Other women played on Double-A minor league baseball teams. In 1931, Jackie Mitchell, a pitcher for the Chattanooga Lookouts, a Double-A team, struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig in an exhibition game. Women playing baseball were not unknown. Even Hollywood had examples. So by 1943, when Philip Wrigley founded the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League and began looking for players to staff his teams, there were plenty of places for him to look.
In the 30s especially, and early 40s, softball was a very popular sport for both men and women. And the amateur softball associations at that time promoted women's softball just the same as they did men's. They had city, district, regional, and national competitions for both. So the skill of the women players was very good because those that went to the national playoffs, they had to be good to get there. At the end of the softball seasons, Wrigley had his field available for the championship games for the city that would fill the stands for both the men and the women.
I read an article in the Hutchinson News. I was still in high school. And Fred Mendel was the sports writer, and he said Philip Wrigley was starting this professional women's baseball or softball team. So I wrote him a letter, and he answered me. Ken Sales said they wouldn't have any scouts in my area, but they would pay my transportation. That was during the war, and my mother didn't want me to ride on the train by myself, so I wrote them another letter. And they said, your mother's welcome to come.
I was working at Schuster's in the candy department to earn money for school, and I played a softball on their team. And I got a telegram from Jack Cloza. Jack Cloza was a former Milwaukee Brewer who had a softball team on the north side, and Bunny Brief was my coach. He had a softball team on the playgrounds on the south side. And he got to be manager, and he needed a player in left field immediately. And he remembered me from playing against his team, and he just sent a wire and said, have job for you and Rockford Peaches, report to Racine.
Arthur Meyerhoff was one of the people he utilized to go to the cities that he had chosen and work with the businessmen there to help back the teams. He started the All-American Girls Softball League. That was the title. But the rules of play were those of baseball because he thought that baseball was a better spectator sport than softball. That title was only used the first year. About midway through the season, Wrigley and Meyerhoff started advertising it as girls baseball.
Publicity was key to bringing talent to the new league. Arthur Meyerhoff, a Chicago advertising mogul who eventually bought the league from Wrigley, placed ads and articles in national magazines such as Life and Time, as well as in the local newspapers.
After high school, I just got a job and I was working. And I saw a little piece in a paper, just a little tiny article of tryouts in McKeesport, Pennsylvania for this All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. Well, I never had heard about it. I didn't know anything about it. So I called the girls on our team and I asked if they wanted to go, let's go out and just see what this is all about. So we got out there. There were like 75 to 100 girls from Ohio, West Virginia, and different places.
In 1945, Dad was still alive, And he saw in the Sunday or in the paper that there was going to be a women baseball league coming to Grand Rapids.
In school, the guidance counselor was trying to get me interested in college courses, and I always told her that I was going to play professional ball. And she said, "But Sue, girls don't play professional baseball." I said, "I don't care." I kind of had the attitude the good Lord would see to that. And one day in the spring of 1949, probably March, she came down, got me out of class to show me a magazine, to show me about this league in the Midwest. So she quit trying to talk me into go to college.
I didn't find out until I was a senior in high school. There was an advertisement in the largest town nearby where I grew up at Lakeview, Ohio, was Lima. And so in the Lima newspaper, there was a little article saying there were going to be tryouts in Michigan. And so I decided that I would try to go up there.
I accidentally was reading a softball book, rule book. And in the back of it, it said Women's Professional Baseball, and they gave a name and an address in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I wrote to them.
The league also used professional scouts from baseball, hockey, and other sports. Scouts were always on the lookout for additional talent and traveled the country to find players.
I was out at the University of California at Berkeley working on my master's degree in '48, and I was playing at the time with some softball players in Alameda, California, and they were quite famous because they were world champions. And I knew two girls out there who happened to be members of the All-American League. And they told me about it, and they told me that Bill Allington was a scout and a coach, and he was trying people out. So I got a hold of him, and he tried me out. And I was an outfielder, so he hit a lot of fly balls to see if I could catch, and checked my arm out, see if I could throw, whether I could run. And next thing I knew, I was in Peoria, Illinois. I was sent there to play with the Red Wings. I knew Milwaukee had a team. I became a knot holder. Yes, because we didn't have money. No, nobody had any kind of money. I was a catcher, and another lady, Edna Schur, lived in Cedarburg, another suburb, and we both were scouted. And then in June, a man's professional baseball scout that my dad sent my older brothers to his baseball school, and would have sent me, but they had no facilities for girls. Came up to make sure that my dad took me to Little Rock, which was about 75 miles south, to this game that these two girls' teams were going to be playing, because he thought I should try out. And I tried out before the game one afternoon. They wanted to sign me to a contract, send me home to get packed to leave with them after the game the next day.
Advertising, scouting, and tryouts in local ballparks and gymnasiums, even recommendations from current and former All-Americans, all brought players to the new league.
I was 17 years old. Wrigley sent scouts all over the United States and Canada, and I wasn't even home when I was scouted. I mean, the girls called me up. They finally tracked me down and said, "Are you going to the tryouts?" And I said, "What tryouts?" They said, "Well, there's a scout here from Chicago, and Wrigley is forming a women's team because a lot of the guys are already signing up and going into the Army, and he's afraid that he'd have an empty ballpark." So I said, try out. I said, "You know, it's 32 degrees out there and we got snow flurries." And they said, "Well, we're going to try it in a gym." And I said, "In a gym?" And they said, "Yeah, Burston Fieldhouse." And I said, "Well, that's near my home." Gotzik hit us grounders, and we played catch and batted, and he picked three of us, but the one girl was married and the other girl was taking care of her elderly parents, so I was the only one that left from Flint.
I was a junior in high school. I was playing on a Sunday afternoon, softball. And apparently, in South Bend, they do have a board of directors. So one of the board of directors, his mother lived in Minster, Ohio. He was coming by, apparently, and a week later, he sent me a contract. My dad and I looked at it, my mother looked at it, and we said, and We said, it's not softball, this is baseball. And I said, I certainly will try out. And that was in 1951. That was March. I went into spring training in May in South Bend. And there must have been probably, I'd say, about 100 trying out for 4 positions as being rookies with the manager, who was Carl Winch, to play ball.
Played in St. Henry, Ohio. This was in May during school time, and a scout from Fort Wayne happened to be there. And he told the coach from St. Henry that, hey, I think that girl can play ball, and she could play on the Fort Wayne Daisies team. And he says, well, who are the Fort Wayne Daisies? He never heard of Fort Wayne either, or girls baseball. So his daughter was a senior, and so he says, well, I would like to see those 2 try out for Fort Wayne Daisies. And so he's the one that took me after school was out, which was like May 23rd, and we went to Fort Wayne, and I started pitching infield practice, and Max Carey was the coach, Hall of Famer, and he says, yes, you can stay.
This man came up to me, asked me if I'd like to play professional baseball. I said, yeah, I'm trying to, because I seen it in the magazine, you know. He said, well, there's a girl 8 miles from here that plays. And he gave me her name and everything, which is Rita Briggs. He said, she's gone right now. She just left for spring training. I'll give you her address, and you go up and see her in October. And she tried me out, throw the ball and hitting and all that stuff. She said, you'll make it.
Our Moose Jaw Royal team won the Western Canadian Championship, and there was a scout there. I think it was Mr. Bishop. And he asked me if I would be interested in coming down next spring for a tryout with the All-American girls, and I think it was in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So I said, yes, I would.
Well, I read in the paper that there were tryouts at this Marquette Park, which I lived probably a mile. And so I thought, oh, I think I'll go over and try out. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be a first baseman, but the gentleman that was running the tryouts said, I think you have the statute of a catcher. So I became a catcher, which I loved.
In 1944, that was the first time that I got to see the Kenosha Comets, who were one of the original teams in the league. It was really funny because they had a bunch of injuries on the team. They picked 2 girls from Kenosha to fill in. Well, luckily I was one of them. I got in uniform and everything for that series, and all I did was get up to pinch hit once, and I fouled the ball, and I considered myself lucky. Well, I thought, oh my heavens, when I saw how these girls played ball, I thought, what a dream this would be. You know, I always wanted to play professional ball.
When I graduated from high school, my high school English teacher, Mrs. Nelson, put me in touch with another lady that had graduated. I hadn't heard anything about the league, and I mean, it wasn't widely known around, you know, especially in the big cities. So she put me in touch with Doris Neal that was already playing. So we went down to the Kronk Recreation in Detroit. There was a lot of girls from the Detroit, Michigan area. In fact, Michigan had more of the girls in the league than any other state. And so that's where they would go to practice in the wintertime. And so I went down there with them to practice. From there, one of the girls, Marge Wenzel's father, I think, was a scout. Helen Filarski then took me on to South Bend with her for a tryout in the spring of 1950.
I was 21. They had tryouts in Allentown, Pennsylvania for the All-American girls. I didn't know anything about it, but I got a telephone call from a scout in Allentown and wanted to know if I was interested in playing a professional league. I didn't know what he was talking about. I had never heard of the league, and it took me about 10 seconds to say, yes, I'm interested. So I took this train ride. I was going to Pascagoula, Mississippi. They were going to expand the league, 2 teams, I think. and they had 500 rookies come down there to try out for the league, and none of the veterans came until a week later. And we took over the barracks of a naval base, and we played ball every day, had a number on our back, and it was fun. And I survived the 2 weeks. The veterans came, and then some of the board of directors arrived to decide who they wanted, if they wanted anybody. And I was chosen by South Bend.